Welcome to the first of our more focused group meetings on Envision 2050, which is an update to the Northern Middlesex Long-Range Regional Transportation Plan, a 30-year document, runs out to 2050. And I just wanted to go over some housekeeping. I know I mentioned this earlier for everyone, but I want to mention again that we have an icebreaker question in the chat. Enter your favorite place to walk or bike in the NMCOG region. Just put that in the chat. So before we get started, I just want to introduce our team that's here today. My name is, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Justin Howard. I'm the Transportation Director at the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. And so joining me today are three of our team members. One, Jessica Belanger, who joined us when did you join us? October of this year, and yes, and she'll be going an overview of the regional transportation plan today. Also joining us is Shravanti Gopalan-Narayanan, who you've probably heard of. She is big into the outreach of this plan, and we'll go over a lot of bicycle pedestrian statistics a little bit later. And our last member is our transit manager, Chris Curry, who will be facilitating some of the breakout rooms today. So before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. We want to make sure everyone knows the ground rules. Everyone has a voice. All views and opinions are valued. We must speak with respect during this meeting. One person speaks at a time. And it's okay not to agree, but just as long as everyone shows respect towards everyone's opinions, we'll have a really successful meeting. And I want to point out here how you can participate in this meeting. So while you're not participating, we would prefer if you stayed on mute. But when it comes time after the presentation and during the breakout meetings, if you would like to participate, you would just go down, use your controls to raise your hand, which is down below on your screen. You just click on reactions, and there's the raise hand button. So you raise that, and once that's raised, the host will be notified that you've raised it, and we will call on you. And when we call on you, just unmute yourself and you can speak. So, and just a reminder to minimize the background noise. We just ask that you mute yourself during when you're not speaking. And now I'd like to turn it over to Jessica Belanger, who will be giving us an overview of the RTP.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Justin. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today our agenda is to cover the RTP first. We're going to review some of the current conditions. We're going to jump into our breakout rooms, and then we'll return back to the main group where we'll ask that we can share what was discussed in the breakout rooms. We'll finish up by sharing our ongoing activities, and then we'll finish up with questions. Next slide, please. So what is a regional transportation plan? Our regional transportation plan is one of the 3 federally required certification documents. As Justin mentioned, we're required to update the plan every 4 to 5 years, and this current plan is being called Envision 2050. So we're really interested in envisioning what we'd like our region to be like in the year 2050. The plan objectives are to establish a clear guide that identifies and analyzes our region's transportation infrastructure and service-related improvement needs. This plan is also used to direct transportation investment priorities over a minimum of 20-year time horizon for all modes of transportation. Next slide, please. Envision 2050 is our comprehensive vision for the future of transportation in the NMCOG region. By projecting and planning for anticipated growth over a period of 30 years, this plan will establish a foundation for cost-effective, energy-efficient, and equitable transportation options for all users. The topic areas we will focus on in this plan are economic vitality, safety, infrastructure, environmental and climate resiliency, accessibility and mobility options, connectivity, and equity, with an emphasis on communities that have been historically marginalized. Next slide. This slide is our timeline slide, and it shows you where we are currently in our planning process. This month, we're holding 2 focus groups. So this is the first of 2. The second focus group is later in the week, and that's focused on transit users. So far, we've hosted municipal meetings where we met with all 9 of our communities. We've also met with our partners. That includes folks like UMass Lowell, Mass Hire, and Middlesex 3, some of the other local transportation advocacy groups, including some of the community-based organizations in the city of Lowell. In February through March, we'll be working on developing our draft plan. We'll also have a second regional event, and that's going to be right here in Lowell, and look out for communications on that. And then in June, we will present our plan, our draft plan before the NPO. There'll be a 21-day public comment period, and then in July, we'll be looking at endorsement. And I'll pass it over to Shrivanti.
Thank you, Jessica. Let's now look at the miles of infrastructure in our region. Our region consists of 1762.56 miles of roadways, 345 miles of trails, 572 miles of sidewalks, 55.3 miles of roadways with bicycle facilities, which excludes shallows. Now, when we look at the challenges for pedestrians and bicyclists that we heard in other meetings so far, it includes unmaintained or lack of sidewalk and bicycle facilities, lack of bicycle parking, and access to transit. And later in the breakout session, we would like to hear from you as to what your challenges are. Next slide, please. Now we are looking at the graph, which shows the regional bike and pedestrian crashes between 2014 and 2022. There are more number of pedestrian crashes when compared to bicycle crashes, and overall, both the crashes have reduced over the years. There seems to be a spike in both pedestrian and bicycle crashes in 2015 and 2019, and then the crashes have reduced in the subsequent years. In 2014, pedestrian crashes, please refer the orange line, rose almost 33% from the previous year before slowly reducing to 18% by 2017. In 2018 and 2019, we saw the number of pedestrian crashes rise again with an increase by 20% by 2019. Pedestrian crashes then reduced to 79 in 2020 from 123, that is 123 in 2019, which could be an impact of the pandemic. But there seems to be a rise in crashes again in 2021 and 2022. Now, looking at the bicycle crashes, the number of crashes raised by 13% in 2015 with 82 crashes. A steady drop in crashes followed with a 32% decrease in crashes reported in 2018. Bicycle crashes rose again in 2019 by 25%, but again reduced in 2020 and 2021 before rising to 54 crashes in 2022. Next slide, please. We have developed a map of trails and walkways for all our communities in our region. All trails and bike walkways are denoted in brown and are as in use, which includes National Park Service, Pawtucket Canal, and Merrimack River Walk, which now extends to Concord River Greenway. The paved bike trails like Nashoba River Rail Trail and Bruce Freeman Rail Trail are also highlighted in this map. This map is just an example of what is included in the RTP plan, and we aim to create strong connections for walking and biking in our region as part of this plan. I will now pass it back to Jessica. Thank you.
Shrivanti, thank you. So we are gonna move half of the group over into a breakout room. The other half of the group will remain here. And you'll get a pop-up on your screen and it will ask you to join a breakout room in just a moment. And we're gonna ask that one person in the group take notes and be ready to share back. When we come back into the main group, please share what you discussed. So just look out for a pop-up in just a second. Okay, so I'm gonna jump in the other room.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. And we'll
Thank you.
do 15 minutes and then come back together. What do you say?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our breakout room session. So for today's breakout room, we have some prompts. And after the discussion, we will go back to the main room for debrief and rest of the session. Before moving on to the discussion prompts, I would like to know if anyone is interested to volunteer and report back the themes that we discussed in our breakout room to the main room. Okay. I see no volunteers, so Justin will report back our discussion theme.
Yeah.
Oh, did anyone volunteer?
Would anyone like to volunteer? I can gladly volunteer. I'll gladly volunteer.
Okay. Thank you, Justin. So for our first prompt, we can just either raise our hand like this. Are you joining the session today as cyclist, pedestrian, or both? First, let's go with cyclist. How many of you are cyclist? Okay, I see Bill, Thomas,
Bill and Tom. All right.
Shira. And how about pedestrians?
Tom, Sophie,
Okay.
Ron. Okay.
Okay, I see a lot of people. How many of you are both pedestrians and bicyclists? Okay, I see a lot of you. Thank you. So now we are moving on to the discussion prompts. So please use the raise hand feature under reactions to participate in the discussion. What encourages you to walk or bike more and why?
My cat likes to bike, by the way. Okay.
Go ahead.
Susan.
So you were asking what encourages us to bike more? Was that the question?
Yeah, walk or bike
Okay.
more.
Safety. Safety is a big concern of mine, and I would say that would encompass like off-road trails, enforced speed limits, lower speed limits in town, more signage that, bikes are sharing the road and pedestrians too. And Pepperell, where I live, we have a lot of areas that do not have sidewalks. And then also just enforcement, like police enforcement of vehicles that are breaking the law or that are actually assaulting bicycle riders. Those would be the things that would encourage me more.
Thank you, Susan. Bill, go ahead.
Safety awareness. Okay.
I think you're muted, Bill.
Okay. Yes. Okay. I live in Boston, but I ride my bicycle in your area frequently, both by myself and with groups. And of course, I echo some of the concerns we've heard. But I would like to add something: is the conditions of the roads. You can't always stay on a trail. You got to get off the trail to ultimately get to where you need to go. And I find, maybe some of the drivers are a problem, but most of the drivers are just fine. I have no quarrel with the drive. I have very few quarrels with most drivers. But the roads, if the roads are in bad condition or they haven't been swept, and you've got crud in the, over that curb and shoulder. That is really rough for bike riders. And so I would like, the condition of the road surface on the regular roads, both the condition and the maintenance is important to us. And you can even go, you talk about bike riders and motorists sort of fighting. I don't want to hear about it. If you look at the condition of the roads, at least down here in the Boston area, motorists and cyclists should be natural allies in trying to improve the road. So the you can even, it had a little slide you had for challenges. You only had 3 things on the bottom there. You had room for a 4th thing. I would say the condition of the roads is definitely a bicycle issue. At least that. So that's, here I am weighing in from out of town. So thank you for taking my comments here.
Of course, thank you so much for sharing that. John?
Go ahead, Don.
I don't think we can hear you. I don't still hear you.
No, we're not hearing you, Don.
Do you want to try using the chat?
All right, maybe we can come back to Don. Let's go to Sophie.
Mm-hmm.
I first had a question. I wanted to clarify whether you were asking why we currently walk or bike, or what would encourage us to do more.
This is more like what encourages you to walk or bike in general? Like, what are some issues that you face, and what could be made better to encourage you to walk or bike?
Okay, sure. So I guess on a personal level, I tend to walk more, 1, because of the price of gas, and 2, just because given my schedule, I don't always have a lot of time to like go to a gym or regularly exercise, and so I try to kind of build it into my day by walking to anywhere that's within walking distance. On another note, though, I'm the neighborhood planner for the city of Lowell. I do quite a bit of community engagement, and we're working on trying to improve our pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure around Lowell, and have done quite a bit of community engagement involving those topics. And so a lot of the feedback I get from people in general is kind of the same response of, it's a great way to get exercise. But for a lot of people, walking or biking is actually really their only mode of transportation. It's just what they have available right now. There are people who bike on the highway to get to work every day. And so it comes from a place of necessity for a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Sophie. John, were you able to figure the audio? Do you want to try again, John? We still don't hear you. Do you want to leave something in the chat? Like, do you want to leave your comment in the chat and I can share it with the group? And I'm sorry that you have some audio issues.
Okay. Shrivanti, why don't you go on to the next question?
Sure. So our next prompt is, are there bike lanes, sidewalks, or crossing signals on most of the roads that you use? I'm going to repeat the question. Are there bike lanes, sidewalks, or crossing signals on most of the roads that you use? Please feel free to raise hand. Okay, I see Sophie's hands up.
Yeah, I'd say around Lowell at least. I think what we're lacking the most is bike lanes. And where we do have bike lanes, a lot of the striping is quite faded, so they're hard to see and it doesn't create safe conditions for cyclists, especially on busier roads. I'd say that our crossing signals and sidewalks are in pretty decent shape, at least for downtown, but the more you get into our residential neighborhoods, it's not necessarily, I wouldn't say the same for those areas. So I think our sidewalks and pedestrian crossings could definitely use a little love in a lot of our residential neighborhoods.
Right, and because of snow plowing, I think there's also a lot of the pavement markings, they fade away quicker than the usual. Thank you. Susan?
No, where I live on the west side of Pepperell, we do not have sidewalks or signals. And a major issue for me is that I live 1 mile from a grocery store, but there's a major road that I have to cross and there's no signal there and there are no sidewalks to get to the grocery store.
Right. Ronald? I think you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I like Sue, I also live in Pepperell. I live closer to the old center of town. And what's discouraging is there are 4 major roads meet in the center of town and only one has an extended sidewalks. 2 of the roads, the sidewalks peter out after about 600 feet. And the street that I happen to live on has no sidewalk at all. And this is in a more built-up part of town. And that makes it difficult to do walking, and walking is my primary form of exercise. And I would very, very much like to see the expansion of sidewalk systems in Pepperell, because we do have some great trails. We have some other things, but right now, a lot of times when I use the trails, I end up driving to get to the trails, whereas I could definitely walk if there were more convenient and safer sidewalks.
Right. Yeah, connectivity to destinations is also something that we've been hearing about. So thank you for sharing that. And so we have a comment from Dawn. Having a separated infrastructure item like Bruce Freeman Rail Trail encourages me to bike. My concerns, roads with no shoulders, we have many of them. Yeah, I think this is also something that we've been hearing, like the bike lanes that are not always the bike lanes are safer to ride unless and until there's like a, unless and until they are separated bike lanes. So yeah, thank you, Dawn, for sharing that. Susan, do you still have your hand up? Okay, Bill, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, Don, thank you for mentioning the shoulders. And even if you have a shoulder, you're riding the bike on the shoulder, and then suddenly it disappears. It becomes gravel for about 4 feet, and then it resumes. That is as bad as having no shoulder at all, because you're riding along, and then anyway, I've made my point. And then also on the shoulders, you have to run the street sweepers along them occasionally. There we go. That's my condition.
Yep.
Thank you for adding that, Bill. Okay, I don't see any other hands up, so let's move on to the next prompt. Do you view biking and walking as exercise or a mode of travel, and why? I think a lot of the previous participants touched upon this, but is there in specific that you would like to share? I will repeat the question. Do you view biking and walking as exercise or a mode of travel, and why? Go ahead, Susan.
So I see it both as exercise and definitely a mode of transportation, but also it's a form of recreation, like mountain climbing or kayaking. It's fun and it's good for you psychologically.
Hmm. Okay. I don't see any. Oh, there's Dawn.
Yeah.
A comment from Dawn. One major issue we have in Westford is that we have many sidewalks in the neighborhoods, but the neighborhoods are not connected by sidewalks. So it's not safe to walk to destinations. Yeah, I think once again, the issue of connectivity to destinations and, having that connection to where you want to go rather than, having it at random places. Right. Okay, moving on to the next question. So I think safety was mentioned as a concern before, but is safety a concern when choosing your mode? How far is safety a factor in deciding which mode you take? Go ahead, Sophie.
I would say on a personal level and, in terms of what I've heard from people in Lowell, I think safety is a huge factor in deciding how people are going to travel. And in fact, I hear a lot from people saying that they would prefer to bike or to walk to their destinations, but they just don't feel safe enough to do so. And if the city were to implement some things like traffic calming measures, protected bike lanes, even safe places for people to store their bikes, it would encourage a lot more people to take advantage of that infrastructure. And I can say for myself, I tend to walk more than biking because the sidewalks are usually more consistent than things like bike lanes. And so it's definitely a concern on a personal level as well.
Right, yeah. Infrastructure plays a major role. Thank you for sharing that. Susan?
Yeah, safety is a big factor for me in deciding where I'm going to ride. And that changed actually in the last 2 years because I was finding more cars on the road going really fast. And I did end up being assaulted by a car. And I was told by the police that because I wasn't killed or injured, I had no grounds. So now I've really changed my behavior in terms of cycling, and I really look at cycling as one way to reduce my CO2 footprint. So it's really kind of disappointing to me. So I'm really glad that you're doing this focus group.
Thank you so much, Susan. Yeah, I think because of after the pandemic, there has definitely been a lot of issues with speeding. Like when I'm on road, I see a lot of, speeding. So yeah. Sharon, were you trying to raise a hand? I think you're muted.
How do I raise my hand other than raise my hand?
Yeah, whatever works for you.
That works, yeah. Go ahead.
I agree that safety is the issue. I particularly do not prefer to ride my bike, but I don't ride, I say from 4:45 till after rush hour. Because I found that the traffic, well, there's more traffic, certainly, but everybody's on their way home to get home for dinner. They do not care if there's a bike, and they don't look for us. So I won't take my grandchildren out, and I won't ride anywhere around the 5 o'clock hour because I find that the drivers are just really poor. And they, it doesn't matter if there's a bicycle in the way. And that's exclusive of all the bike lanes and the conditions and all of those things. I think riding a bike anywhere around the rush hour is not safe.
Thank you for sharing that, Sharon.
And unfortunately, that's when I have the time. So that's kind of a problem for me.
Right.
But if there were better controls on the traffic, meaning better marked crosswalks, etc., Better control of people at red lights, that
Mm,
don't run red and yellow.
Mhm.
Those two things would help a great deal.
right. Thank you.
Mhm.
And we have a comment from Don. He agrees and he says traffic speed is a major concern for cycling. Thank you, Don. Okay, moving on to the next prompt. Can you accomplish most of your goals, errands, or essentials by walking or biking? Why and why not? I think this was also previously touched upon, but is there any specific that anyone would like to point out? Okay, let's move on to the next prompt then.
Uh,
Um,
Go ahead, Sue.
Actually,
go
I-
ahead, Susan.
So it took me a moment to think about that. Like I was thinking that, you know, like the grocery store that I mentioned where there's no sidewalk to get to or bike lanes,
Yeah.
there's no bike parking either. And one thing I've noticed is that e-bikes are becoming more popular, and I think that's a really good thing. But there's, I think, once again, you know, if we had bike parking in more places available, that would help. And then also, you know, even on some of our rail trails, we do have stations for fixing flats and things like that. But I think that we need, you know, better funding to keep those stations in good repair. So those are the kinds of things.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, Shrivanti, let's do the last question real quick before we.
Sure. So do you walk or bike to transit? Why and why not? How many of you take transit? Okay. So do you walk or bike to transit?
Sometimes I bike.
Hmm.
And then this is Sue from Pepperell again. And then I do have a family that lives in Boston, and they take the transit, and then they bike to my house.
Okay. Thank you, Susan. Sophie?
I typically walk just because for the most part, there aren't places to secure my bike at transit stations.
Mhm. Thank you, Sophie. Phil?
Yes, you mentioned transit. I'm looking here at my trusty MBTA commuter rail schedule, and I notice that even with the new schedule, the end of the pandemic, bikes are still not allowed on the trains in the peak direction. And you might send a polite note to the T. Because of pandemic and remote work, they shorten their trains. So they say, well, we don't have room now for bicycles in rush hour. But if they, you know, if they were to add a car back in or something like that, maybe remove a couple seats or something, they'd make it possible for people in your area to get a train downtown. And then what you need to do is you need to get to your job at the other end, you know. So that's, anyway, that's my transit-based suggestion. Expand the availability of putting your bicycles on the MBTA commuter trains.
Okay,
Thank
thanks,
you,
Phil. Well, breakout rooms are over. I guess we're back to the main room. So do people want to share what we've heard in the breakout rooms? Was there a volunteer in the other room?
Yes, we asked Marlies to share what we discussed in the breakout room.
Yeah, it was, first we asked around who was there for walking and who was there for biking. And there was sort of a mix with more people liking walking than liking biking. But I think we had like 7 people, so representing hundreds of thousands of residents might be a little off. And then there was also a question about what was a particular hotspot for improvements. And several people mentioned an area where they thought it was difficult to cross the road because it was 6 lanes and you only had 9 seconds, or it was there weren't enough sidewalks in a newly built intersection where you might imagine that there would be a more thoughtful approach with more sidewalks because it was recently built. And yet, perhaps because of transportation or infrastructure standards and codes, that we still cater our infrastructure to the cars. We can talk about catering to bike ped, but in reality, we still cater to the cars. I think that was sort of what I tried to say as I see Ethan nod. Thank you, Ethan.
Okay, great. Thanks, Marlies. I got volunteered to do the note taking and reporting. So we had similar questions. So the first question, you know, are you joining as a cyclist or pedestrian or both? And we get a mix. I think there were a few cyclists, a little more doing both, and a few more mainly walkers. A lot of the big themes that we heard were the issues with connectivity, the issues with safety, and lack of infrastructure. So a lot of discussion about off-road trails, speed limits, sharing the road. There was issues with maintenance of the roadway itself and condition of the roadway itself. Let's see, there were discussions of walking as a form of exercise, people walking more due to the price of gas, and a lot of people with bicycling and walking as their only mode of transportation to get to work. And some of the concerns that we've heard, roads with no shoulders or shoulders that tended to disappear. Neighborhoods, particularly in our suburban areas, that would have sidewalks that just would not connect, no connections between the sidewalks. We asked the questions, any specific lanes, sidewalks, crossing signals, low lax bike lanes on the existing bike lanes that are in Lowell. The pavement markings are faded. We made note that sidewalk infrastructure is lacking, especially in these suburban areas, particularly in Pepperell. Let's see some of the other notes that we had. We asked a question about safety, and safety is a huge factor. There was discussion on traffic calming, on addition of bike lanes, so you're getting back to the infrastructure. Bike storage was an issue. Consistency of sidewalks, speeding of vehicles affected safety. So we had one comment talking about during the peak hour, rush hour conditions, that the amount of traffic and the amount of and the speed of that traffic are really an issue, and that improvements to, say, crosswalks, crossings, better traffic control. Basically more infrastructure was an issue. So those are some of the things we've heard. Like to see if anyone has any other thoughts that they would like to share with the group. Marlies.
Yeah, I also would like to throw it on a slightly different tangent, since we're talking RTP and there was a previous transportation plan, and I believe the Middlesex Canal. So all of a sudden I'm talking a canal, not necessarily boating, but the canal used to have a towpath.
Mhm.
And I believe that was always near and dear to the NMCOG planning. A lot of plans and feasibility plans were done by NMCOG. And I just wanted to make sure that just because nothing has really been thoroughly implemented, I mean, there are definitely walks on these towpaths in Billerica, as far as I know. I'm sure that there are different areas, but that we keep that in the plan and keep hammering on to get it done, because that would be a great way. The canal was the original highway that connected Boston all the way to Lowell and really further on the Merrimack River, but that's a 26-mile distance to Charlestown. And if you could bike it today, it might take you longer by car than riding the bike trail. So that's just what I wanted to put out there, that we pay attention to these opportunities. Thank you.
Yeah, and as you know, Tom Raphael was very important to push that project, and it's something that, yeah, we need to consider, and the Middlesex Canal Commission is interested in pursuing that. That's definitely something that we will take into consideration in this plan. Go ahead, Karen. You're muted, Karen.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
With regard to the previous comments about infrastructure and including it in planning, it seems we keep running into I'll speak for myself. I keep running into a similar structural vision that comes up as being, for me, incomplete. Because I think it's not just with developments, you know, like of downtown developments or anything, but for instance, we have a new warehouse proposal in our area, and have gotten a lot of information on the effects of warehouses on traffic, and it seems as if we were moving at the level of a community visioning process, and I'm congratulating all of you for doing that. But if we were including that as a part of our principles for operating as a community, then that would drop down into not just you know, road development and things, but even evaluating cars and bikes versus semis coming into town, and how do we make those tough decisions about that? And I'm just wondering what people think about the importance of doing community visioning and identifying those top level goals that we all strive towards.
Karen, thank you for the comment. I think that certainly makes sense. I know that under the Complete Streets plan, many communities start off with the Complete Streets policy and establish sort of shared goals on the municipal level, and use that as the foundation for guiding additional projects as you're approached by maybe a developer or a warehouse that's looking to establish a location in your town. It's a good place to sort of turn back to the policy and confirm that they are meeting your goals. And I can drop the link in the chat for the Complete Streets program. Thanks. Emily?
Yes, I would like to reinforce something that came up in our group that Kate Hollister said, which is, can we please somehow work on the state allowing for local control of speed limits? I noticed that Concord and Carlisle both have townwide speed limits now of 25 miles an hour. And, you know, it seems like a big process to have to go through that, but I think that would make a huge difference, especially to non-urban towns.
Thank you, Emily. That's very helpful. And I'd also like to mention that we can, NMCOG, we can often work with municipal staff to initiate a conversation with MassDOT. If there's particular roads that are MassDOT owned roads and you'd like to seriously look at the speed limit, we're happy to facilitate a conversation between both municipalities and MassDOT. We speak with MassDOT frequently and work closely with them on our MPO.
And have you had success in that?
Well, Justin, maybe you can speak to that.
Sure. We're actually currently working with Westford. Westford is looking to lower their municipal speed limits, but it's just a process you have to go through the state, and we're gladly facilitating that conversation between any of our communities and the state, because we have.
Well, I live in Westford, so I'm thrilled to hear that.
Okay, yeah, we're talking. I mean, I've talked with Paul Sterrick, and I've talked with Jody Reed, and yeah, so.
We're happy to get the right people in the room to talk about specific areas.
Okay, we have a new town manager, so good.
Yes. So
It's just the state's philosophy of how speed limits are determined that I think is the big bugaboo.
Well, it's the old follow the 85th percentile speed limit for setting speed limits. So, but it's something that the state is working to get away from.
Well, we may be in touch with you, Justin. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Susan?
Yeah, I think something else that I'd love to see as part of the transportation plan relative to bikes and pedestrians is consideration to rest areas, places where there's seating that's in the shade, especially with our changing climate, and also water fountains. I think would be really great. And if we're worried about vandalization, just keep putting them in key places. Like in Pepperell, we have a place called Railroad Square, which is a starting place for a lot of people that get on our rail trail for walking or riding or rollerblading. So those would be a couple of things, sort of like we have rest areas for cars. I'd love to see it for bikes and pedestrians.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's very important as you think of all of the amenities that you really need to make the transportation experience better. If you're interested in putting in a path, you should think of restrooms, water fountains, trash barrels, those types of things. And those features, like a bench, really do go a long way in terms of making people utilize the space. So thank you for that. Paula?
Yes, actually what Susan just said, another Pepperell person. Hi, everybody from Pepperell and everybody else. There's like 4 people on the call at least. But what Susan was just saying about the benches, so we've had this issue come up in the past because the Nashua River Rail Trail, of course, is not owned by the town. It's a DCR property, and they're not always really receptive to certain things that happen on the trail. So have other people been able to see things like this happen? I mean, this kiosk is a few benches downtown. There's bike racks, but people have asked for, of course, a water station and more benches along the trail, but that's always been an issue with asking, requesting things on property that's state owned. So, but if someone knows how to go about getting that permission, it'd be handy to know. And the other thing about the speed limit, so is that can you only control the speed limits on state numbered roads or state owned roads, or throughout the whole town? How does that work?
There is a way to do it throughout town.
Okay.
Depending on, it's a procedure you have to go through with MassDOT. But in general, when you develop a speed limit, it is based on the 85th percentile speed of the vehicles that are on the road. That's the general engineering term for development of speed limits. But we're slowly trying to get away from that, and you see that in multiple communities that do have the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit throughout the community now. And then there's also thickly settled areas where you'll see lowered speed limits. So that's another thing you can do.
Okay, thank you, Justin.
Yep.
I think we should open it up at this point for any questions on the presentation or anything we discussed today.
You want to finish up the presentation, Jessica?
Yep, sure. Sounds
Okay,
good.
hold on one second here.
I mean, we had limited questions and limited time, so I'm just curious how this can actually be useful.
This is one of our, one of multiple tools that we're using to write our long-range regional transportation plan. We've met with all of the municipalities in our region. We have a survey that's been circulating for a few months. And then we also have a meeting in a box, as you can see on the slide. So that's residents or interested parties that we've asked to actually facilitate similar meetings to this. So it's really a culmination of a few different engagement activities that we're using to inform the plan. Justin, sorry, I didn't mean to jump right in.
And Kay, we're glad to meet with you and talk about this further if there's something you would like to talk in more detail, and if there are other groups that we need to reach out to that you know of, feel free to.
Can I quickly ask 2 questions and then I have to go? We have company leaving. Who in the municipalities did you talk to in December? Just town staff?
We had a municipal meeting with Westford. We met with the engineer and the planner.
And then
Okay, and my other question is, could you email us the slide deck that you presented today, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. And I'm
Thanks.
also connected with the pedestrian committee. I'm also a member on the pedestrian committee. So
Oh, who's that?
Jessica Belanger.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. Okay, guys, bye. I'm sorry to have to leave.
No worries. Take care.
Thank you, Emily.
Last but not least, we have a second event. This is our Envision 2050 event number 2 on March 22nd. So that event will take place in Lowell, and we'll be sending out information on our upcoming event very soon. During this event, we are going to share our preliminary survey results, as well as some of the initial findings for the plan that will be coming out in June. So we hope to see you all there. And as we mentioned, we will be sharing the slides from today's event. We will not be sharing the recording. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Or if there's something we didn't touch upon, we're happy to discuss further.
Is that only in person?
It's going to be a hybrid event.
Yeah, it'll be a
Okay,
hybrid.
great. Thanks.
Marlise, would you have your hand up?
Yeah, could we go back to that map that had the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail?
Sure. One second. Oops, excuse me. Okay.
So it has the Nashua River Rail Trail and the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and the heading says trails and walkways in the northern Middlesex region, but it doesn't show the Bay Circuit Trail. That's a pretty important trail, right?
Yes, this is an example. This is not the final product.
I see.
This is
Okay.
what we've taken from basically the MassDOT road inventory file. But
I see. Okay, thank you.
we'll have in our trails and walkways, we'll have the Yankee Doodle bike path, a proposed path that goes right through Borica, and a lot of other proposed walkways as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, does anybody have any other questions before we end the session? Okay, well, we appreciate you taking your time with us today, and if there's anything that you think of that you may want to consider as part of this plan in the near future, feel free to contact us. We'll gladly take any kind of information. we can have further conversations. If Kate, you want to reach out to us, and we will do a follow-up to this meeting with everyone who attended. So with that, thank you everyone for coming.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank
day,
you so
everybody.
much.